At my first internship, my manager laughed loudly. "She's good enough to shine for a moment, but not enough to change the sky." I smiled, took notes, and waited. Decades later, his grandchildren worked in companies founded by mine, never knowing that every paycheck they earned came stamped with the crest of a woman he had once dismissed as invisible. It was the summer of 1991. I was 21 and desperate to prove myself. A third-year business major at the University of Houston, raised by a mother who cleaned houses and a father who fixed air conditioners until his back gave out. My family didn't know about resumes or interviews. They just told me, "Work twice as hard and keep your mouth shut." That advice worked for them. I thought maybe it would work for me too. I got an internship with Caldwell and McCree Logistics, a Houston-based shipping company, big name in the freight world back then. Offices downtown with glass walls, fancy elevators, and women in heels that clicked like typewriters on the marble floors. I showed up with 2 pairs of thrifted slacks and a blazer one size too tight. I was the only black woman in the intern group. I noticed that right away. They sat me in a back cubicle near the printer. My first assignment was data entry, freight invoices, pickup logs, delay reports. It was boring. It was beneath my skill set. But I did it fast and clean. I even found a pattern in late shipments from their El Paso yard and suggested a routing change that saved time and fuel. That got me my first real meeting with Douglas Rayburn. He was the regional director. Mid-40s. Slender, neatly parted hair. A gold pinky ring he liked to flash when talking. The type who never loosened his tie, even on Fridays. Everyone in the office called him Mr. Rayburn, even managers. I was nervous but proud. I had spreadsheets, graphs, everything laid out. He walked in 10 minutes late, sipped his coffee, and stared at my binder like it was a menu he wasn't planning to order from. I walked him through the numbers, how we could reroute about 6% of westbound shipments and eliminate deadhead runs. It wasn't rocket science, but it could save the company about $12,000 per quarter. I waited for his response. He looked up, tilted his head, then said loud, like he wanted everyone to hear, "She's good enough to shine for a moment, but not enough to change the sky." Then he laughed. Loud. Sharp. Like it was the punchline of a joke he'd told before. The room froze. One analyst chuckled nervously. Another just looked down at her notes. I felt every pair of eyes in that room avoid mine. I smiled. I said, "Thank you for your feedback, Mr. Rayburn." But inside something snapped. I had been polite. I had worked harder than anyone else in that office. And he saw none of it, or worse, he saw it and didn't care. From that moment on, I decided something very clear. I would outlast him. Outgrow him. Outbuild everything he ever thought was his to keep. I left that internship with no offer, no reference letter, no contacts. I graduated and took a job at a small supply chain tech firm in Conroe. They paid me $28,000 a year. I didn't care. I stayed late. Took courses online in Java, SQL, and systems optimization. I studied freight patterns for fun. Over the next 10 years I climbed. I became a lead operations planner, then director, then VP of logistics. By the time I was 34, I had enough saved and enough vision to try something big. I launched Northridge Fulfillment from a 1-bedroom apartment in Arlington. At first, it was just me and a part-time coder. We created shipping software for Etsy sellers and small online retailers who couldn't afford the giants like FedEx Commerce. Our system was lean, fast, cheaper. We let mom-and-pop shops play with the big boys, and that made us dangerous. We struggled for years. Investors didn't believe in us. One man told me, "You're a niche product for a niche market. Nobody's going to bite." But then 2008 hit. The recession crushed bloated companies. We survived because we were light, flexible. We didn't need big clients, we had hundreds of small ones. We grew 400% that year. By 2014, we had warehouses in 4 states. By 2016, we bought out Logie Drive and Aeropath, 2 of our early rivals. And that gave us something I didn't expect: access to failing legacy contracts from old firms. One of them? Caldwell and McCree Logistics. They were bleeding money, desperately trying to adapt. And guess who was on the asset list? That's right. The firm where I once sat in a back cubicle was now owned fully by me. Douglas Rayburn had retired by then. Quietly, some whispers about missing funds, but nothing stuck. Still, the company was in freefall. I didn't want it for the business. I wanted it for the symbolism. We shut down the original Houston office, turned it into an outreach hub for young entrepreneurs from underfunded schools. The same type of school I came from. The new training room has my name etched on the wall. Then came the part that still makes me sit in silence some nights. In 2021, we launched an internship program for high school seniors across Texas. We gave them the kind of mentorship I never had: real hands-on work, pay, and leadership coaching. That's where I saw the name, Landon Rayburn. I checked. His brother, Miles Rayburn, was already working for us in our Dallas procurement branch. At first, I was in shock. I had never thought of Douglas Rayburn again, not really. But here were his grandsons, applying to a company I built, asking for a chance. I reviewed Landon's file myself. GPA, 3.9. Leadership in Robotics Club. Soft-spoken, kind. We accepted him. I met him once at a company mixer. He had no idea who I was. He thanked me for, "What you built, this place changes lives." I smiled. He'll never know. Neither will his brother. They'll work for years, maybe decades, in systems designed by the woman their grandfather tried to humiliate. I've never said anything. Never told anyone outside my inner circle. Not because I'm afraid, but because I already won. And honestly, I hope they succeed. I hope they make something of themselves, something bigger than the man whose shadow they carry. Because I did. I changed the sky anyway. About a year after Landon joined as an intern, I got word from HR that he'd been suspended for access violations. At first, I brushed it off. Interns sometimes clicked the wrong files, tried to explore systems they weren't trained on. But this one was different. He hadn't just wandered into restricted folders. He'd copied documents, downloaded proprietary algorithms, even tried to log into our internal audit reports. That raised every alarm we had. I ordered a full internal review, and what we found made my stomach twist. Emails. Landon had been communicating with someone outside the company, a man in his 60s, using a burner email. The messages were short, cryptic, but the timestamps matched the data breaches. One stuck out. Got the back-end architecture. Still need inventory algorithms. Then we can replicate. Northridge isn't untouchable. I stared at the screen. My heart slowed, then pounded like a war drum. The IP trace came back 2 days later. The burner email was accessed from an address in Spring, Texas. Douglas Rayburn's home. I hadn't heard his name in years. He was supposed to be retired, washed up. But here he was clawing around the edges of the empire I built, using his own grandson to try and crack it open. I felt sick. Not just because of the betrayal, but because I had let them in. I had opened the door. I called Landon into my office. He looked terrified, like a kid caught stealing from a corner store, not a corporate saboteur. "Do you know who I am?" I asked. He swallowed. "You're the CEO." "No," I said slowly. "I'm the woman your grandfather mocked. In front of a full room. Told me I'd shine for a moment, but never change the sky. I'm the reason your family still gets a paycheck every 2 weeks." He didn't speak. His hands trembled. I kept going. "I gave you a chance. A real one. I didn't hold your name against you. But you brought him back into my life. And for what? Loyalty to a man who never built a damn thing without stepping on someone else." He cried. "I wasn't ready for that." "I didn't know," he whispered. "He told me your company stole from his. That you ruined him. That you used insider info from your internship." I stared at him. That bastard. Even after all these years, Douglas Rayburn was still rewriting history. I suspended Landon immediately. But I didn't fire him. Not yet. Instead, I flew to Spring, Texas. He was living in a modest house. Nothing like the suits and glass offices he used to parade through. He answered the door slowly. Gray hair, same smug eyes. Like he'd been waiting. "Took you long enough," he said. I stepped inside. "Didn't ask for permission. You used your grandson to steal from me," I said. "Why?" He sat. Smiled like he was playing chess. "Because you didn't deserve it. You never did. You were clever, sure. But you got lucky. You took shortcuts. I built my name over 30 years. And you erased it in 1 decade. I nodded slowly. Then I leaned in. You're right. I erased your name. Because it stood for rot. For gatekeeping. For mockery in meeting rooms. And now, every piece of your legacy gets filtered through me. He stood up, fists clenched. You think this is over? No, I said. I think it's just beginning. I left his house with my hands shaking. Not from fear. From restraint. I could have gone nuclear. Pressed charges. Made headlines. But something about Douglas's smug little smirk that final, "You think this is over?" told me he was already playing the next move. So I dug. I called in my personal compliance investigator. Gave him clearance to trace every email, every folder, every IP address Landon had touched in our system. 3 days later, he returned with a USB drive and a folder. "You're not going to like this," he said. He was right. The messages weren't just going to Douglas. There was another recipient. Sean Cutter, CEO of Edgepath Fulfillment, one of our rising competitors. I'd met him once at a trade expo. Young, flashy tech slick. All buzzwords and handshakes. I remember him bragging about how he'd leapfrogged the industry by stealing blueprints instead of drawing them. At the time, I thought it was a joke. Now I wasn't so sure. According to our logs, Landon had passed proprietary software files, pricing models, and internal client rosters straight to Edgepath's back-end system. Cutter had even replied in code referencing Dr. That was the connection. Douglas had brokered the entire thing. It was corporate espionage, and it had already caused damage. That month, 3 of our mid-sized clients had pulled contracts last minute. 2 of them ended up signing with Edgepath. I called a board meeting. Showed them everything. It wasn't just about revenge anymore, this was business warfare. If we didn't act fast, we'd lose more. The legal team wanted to file immediately. But I had a better idea. We let it play out. Quietly. Carefully. We planted fake development files in Landon's access lane. A new product line that didn't exist, just convincing enough to make them bite. We waited to see if Edgepath used it. Within 6 weeks, they announced a revolutionary shipping protocol that was identical to our decoy. We had them. On record. In action. The lawsuits dropped like bombs. Edgepath was hit with injunctions. The media caught wind. Shareholders panicked. Cutter tried to backpedal, said they'd been misled by bad actors. But it was too late. Then the twist I didn't see coming hit like a hammer. Landon turned on them. On all of them. He came forward. Publicly. Provided emails. Testified that Douglas had manipulated him. That Cutter promised his family equity if he helped dismantle Northridge from the inside. The kid broke down on camera. Said he hadn't known the full scope. That he thought he was helping his grandfather reclaim something he'd earned. I didn't speak to the press. I didn't need to. The headlines did the work. Disgraced CEO caught using grandson in espionage plot. Family ties turned toxic in fulfillment feud. The woman he tried to silence now owns the silence. I thought it was over again. But something kept nagging at me. Why Landon? Why now? So I looked into Douglas's finances. And that's when the final truth hit me. Douglas was broke. His pension was gone. Real estate gone. Medical bills piling up. He didn't just want revenge, he needed it. This wasn't about legacy. It was about survival. He had spent his twilight years trying to destroy the only woman who could have helped him. And now he was alone. Landon? He was facing jail time. Maybe probation if the judge showed mercy. The legacy Douglas built had finally collapsed, not in fire, not in fury, but in paperwork, betrayal, and the weight of his own choices. And still, I wasn't finished. They say when you get revenge, you're supposed to feel cold. Empty. Like all that fire leaves you with nothing but smoke and ash. That wasn't true for me. But I didn't feel warm either. What I felt was done. Landon pled guilty to corporate espionage. He avoided prison, but just barely. Community service, a permanent record, and a civil suit that drained every cent he'd earned. His brother Miles quietly resigned a month later. No charges, but the damage to their name stuck. And Douglas? The courts couldn't touch him. He was too careful. Too many layers between him and the actual data theft. But I didn't need a judge to finish what he started. I bought his mortgage. Through a shell company, I acquired the lien on his home in spring. The same house I stood in months before, listening to him spit venom like I was still that intern in a hand-me-down blazer. When the final payment defaulted, my lawyer made the call. Gave him 60 days to vacate. He tried to fight it. Said it was all illegal. Said he knew people. He didn't. Nobody remembered Douglas Rayburn. The industry had moved on. He begged. Then he offered to apologize. Said he'd do it on camera. Said he'd make it right. I said no. There are no cameras that rewind life. No speeches that undo a lifetime of poison. I sent a single envelope to his mailbox the week before the movers came. Inside was a copy of the rerouting report I presented at that meeting in 1991, the one he laughed at. Attached was a sticky note in my handwriting. Still changing the sky. Damn. I wish I could say that ended it for me. That I walked off into the sunset, clean and at peace. But the truth is, part of me still carries it. Every time I hire a young woman who's overlooked. Every time I see someone second-guess themselves in a room full of louder men. And yeah, I made mistakes too. I let anger push me harder than purpose some days. I held on to that voice in my head, his voice, longer than I should have. I let it control more of my life than I ever wanted to admit. But maybe that was the price. The fire that made me build. The rage that gave me a reason when nobody else would. So if you're reading this, and you're wondering if it's worth it, if pushing through the cruelty, the laughing, the underestimation, is worth it, I'll tell you this. Yes. But not because they end up suffering. Because you end up standing. And one day, long after they've forgotten your name, they'll open a paycheck. Look up at the office above them, read a mission statement on the wall, and realize that the sky changed anyway. And it had your name on it.